William James. I am neither a theologian nor a scholar learned in the history of religions, nor an anthropologist. Religion, therefore, as I now ask you arbitrarily to take it, shall mean for us the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual people in their solitude, so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine. The title of today's pulpit talk is Insights, Conversions, with a side order of Fig Newtons. This will be revealed to you shortly. Thank you, Mary, for inviting me to speak today. I'm impressed that you remembered how influential this book was in my education. One reason I'm here today is that the subject may signal the UU Summer Lecture Series on World Religions, and February's theme here is inclusion. I hope that will be apparent. I want to begin with a story that illuminates my title, Insights, Conversions, and Fig Newtons. When my son, Sammy, was 4, he regularly played with his friends, the twins, Max and Ben. They came over to our house because we had a sandbox, a driveway big enough for tricycles, and a yard that invited hide and seek. After vigorous play, all 3 boys came into our kitchen for milk and cookies. Since Sammy's favorite cookies at the time were Fig Newtons, and to this day, that's what I served. Well, Max and Ben would have nothing to do with Fig Newtons. When they saw them, they rolled their eyes, they winced, they pushed the cookie plate away, saying, "We don't like Fig Newtons." Sammy could not believe this. He couldn't understand it. It was a shock. After the twins left, I could hear him muttering, "Max and Ben don't like Fig Newtons." For days, weeks, we could hear him whispering to himself, "Max and Ben don't like Fig Newtons." It clearly troubled him. It seemed to be a crisis in his little 4-year-old life. Childhood traumas of any kind give us pause. We realized that Sammy was in the midst of a developmental crisis. The discovery that other people have minds and preferences of their own. We all know that small children are self-centered. Piaget's theory of cognitive development claims that children overcome their egocentrism somewhere between 7 and 12. So Sammy's discovery that other people have minds and thoughts of their own came pretty early in his life. In both psychology and philosophy, this phenomenon is known as theory of mind. For adults, theory of mind is central to seeing the world in all its complexity. How remarkable that at age 4, Sammy experienced one of life's great mysteries, that each of us understands the world differently. It sounds so simple, but I, for one, have been struck by this mystery over and over and over again. Which leads me to my own conversion story, one of many. When I was 18, I read this book. I had a rolling conversion, one as startling as Sammy's Fig Newton conundrum. When I was a freshman at the University of Michigan, one of the many eye-opening courses I took was the psychology of religion. One of our texts was Varieties of Religious Experience. We also did fieldwork. Individually, we were expected to attend a number of religious services in town and write essays about our experience. At the time, I'm embarrassed to say, I was a rather rigid believer, an insufferable teenager who thought Christianity was the only way and the only truth. My patient parents rolled their eyes when I invited Jehovah's Witnesses into our house for a rejuvenating chat about salvation and the Bible. Well, that narrow view fell away after I read William James and attended different religious services in Ann Arbor. Protestant, Catholic in Latin, Friday prayers at a mosque, Sabbath services at a synagogue, silent Quaker meetings, and Sundays at the local Unitarian church. Firsthand experience of religious multiplicity and this book introduced me to a new world far more interesting than the one I had inhabited. I discovered abundance, complexity, and wonder. In short, I had an awakening, a conversion into open-mindedness. My worldview changed. Many of you know the book, and that James was the father of American psychology. He happened to know Freud, among many other luminaries, and he was the co-founder of pragmatism. So forgive me if I repeat a few things that you already know, but here's the book, all 500 pages of it, a compilation of 20 lectures that James gave at the University of Edinburgh in 1902. 1902, that's a long time ago, 123 years. The book achieved prominence when it was published, and it continues to be consequential today. I've spoken to 3 people this morning who have personal copies in their libraries. Tim Miller has his father's copy, and all 3 have promised me they're going to go home and read it. Okay, this book is fascinating. It's readable. It's not stuffy. It's dense. It's not pedantic. It's not filled with jargon. Here's an example of James' conversational writing style. Quote, "How infinitely passionate a thing religion is at its highest flights can be, like love, like wrath, like hope, ambition, jealousy. With every other instinctive eagerness and impulse, it adds to life an enchantment which is not rationally or logically deducible from anything else." Quote. And here's a short biography. James was born on January 11, 1842 in New York City into an educated, accomplished, and privileged family. As a young man, he was curious about everything, the natural world, culture, history, and how one's own mind thinks. He was a polymath. The choice between a life in art or science lay before him. For 2 years, he studied painting seriously with a well-known American artist, William Hunt. Then he shifted course dramatically. In 1861, he applied to Harvard to study science. 1864, he enrolled in Harvard Medical School. A year later, he dropped out to join a zoological expedition to Brazil with Louis Agassiz. When James returned to Harvard, he resumed medical studies, but he dropped out again for a year to study a new field, psychophysics, in Germany. What drove these sudden shifts and turns? A young man's uncertainty, endless curiosity, and chronic ill health. Fortunately, the family's wherewithal supported his search for a productive and meaningful life. In 1869, James finally completed his medical degree, although he never practiced as a physician. Interesting. Instead, his inquisitive mind propelled him into other fields: psychology, philosophy, religion, plus mountains of publications and a through line of university teaching, primarily at Harvard. The reason I'm including his bumpy road to maturity is that it was not straight. His health was always fragile. Throughout his life, he suffered from chronic ailments, heart and kidney. He died of a heart attack at age 68. not to mention deep bouts of depression, then called melancholia. In 1870, during one particularly dark, depressive episode, he considered suicide seriously. Eventually, a couple of years, he emerged with an insight that served him the rest of his life. It was a conversion of sorts into a belief in the power of free will. James realized he could revisit life experiences and reframe his thinking. In short, he learned he had the power to change his mind and/or his course of action. It sounds simple, and it sounds a lot like an early version of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. It was. James plunged into psychology and published 2 volumes, The Principles of Psychology in 1890. In it, he established a pragmatic view in the practice. Pragmatism, as you all know, values experiential, not theoretical or abstract knowledge as a way of making decisions and coping with life in general. The focus in pragmatism is always on action and outcomes. Today's lingo, you got a problem, what are you going to do about it? James treated thinking and knowledge as human instruments in the struggle to understand and live one's life. Next, he plunged into the study of religious experience. He embarked on the Edinburgh lectures as a scientist using data collection methods, observation case studies. That's what his book illuminates, his research into the religious experience of individuals. And I gave you this quote at the front end, I'm going to repeat it. He said this very clearly, "I am neither a theologian nor a scholar learned in the history of religions, nor an anthropologist. Religion, therefore, as I now ask you arbitrarily to take it, shall mean for us the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual people in their solitude, so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine." James' open-ended data collection centered on individual human experience, prayer, practice, guilt, repentance, disbelief and conversion, praise and transcendence. In the book, James also cited religious and literary tracts, first-person accounts from such luminaries as St. Augustine or Tolstoy. Their conversion stories have long fascinated scholars and believers and skeptics, and James incorporated them into his study. In the 1902 Edinburgh Lectures and the subsequent publication of the book drew international interest and continues to be published with new editions, new introductions, and commentaries. I've referred to what I call my own conversion from a narrow-minded American teenager who thought there was only one truth, one way to think, one way to be, to an ever-evolving view marked by curiosity, a respect for doubt, a profound sense of wonder, and a deep appreciation for this beautiful and multivarious world that we live in. Conversion is about what happens in solitude, or as James wrote in the language of the early 20th century, how individuals, quote, apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine. 3 things in conclusion. 3 things, Mary. I listen, I pay attention. 1, if you're curious about the phenomena of insight and conversion, read James, or St. Augustine, or Tolstoy, or many, many other works of philosophy or literature for stories about change. 2, if you ever think you are stuck, think, what would William James do? WWJD. Look inward, question, doubt, have that conversation, look at things from other points of view, figure out the action you're going to take. Keep an open mind. Explore your alternatives. Favorite phrase of my husband, what are the alternatives? Our ability to change is one of the great mysteries of life. Third, this morning, when you have conversation over in Bowman Hall, or when we return here for discussion, I hope that you will share some of the insights, maybe a conversion or two of your own, and discuss the towering dilemma of Oreos or Fig Newtons. Thank you.